Pierce Larsen is here, and he's pretty excited because Cloudpath 5.8 just came out, and he's going to lay out everything that's going on in terms of 5.8 that's new and what that really means to everybody. So it was great to have Pierce come in and do this. We've been talking about it for quite some time. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy. And we're rolling. Pierce, it's been a long time since we've had a Cloudpath conversation. I think the last time was when Christopher Muhammad was here, and I tried to get Christopher to come in and do another one, but the poor guy's buried, and I've been buried, so we haven't synced up. Yep. And so when you and I were talking the other day, I thought, this is perfect. So welcome. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Matt. No, this is something I wanted to be a part of for a long time, seeing the great content you've been putting out and trying to spread the good word of Cloudpath. So
yeah, so do me a favor real quick. Usually I try to put a little blurb in front of this, but I want you to be able to do it justice. So tell everybody what it is you do with Cloudpath. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, and I guess I can just give you a little history and then kind of tell you where I'm at right now. But I started as a tech support engineer for Cloudpath all those years ago before we were a Ruckus shop. Kevin Koster, some of you guys might have heard of him. He hired me in my underwear in Michigan, right? And just like a Skype interview, and told me to pack up and came out here to Denver, Colorado and started working for Cloudpath as a tech support engineer. And then we went through the acquirements of Ruckus and then Brocade, Eris, CommScope. And throughout that, I ended up moving to more of a senior product solution architect role, and then passing off a lot of that support to, our tech organization. So now I really get involved in everything, right? Brett, my manager, likes to describe it as a SWAT team, right? So anytime there's something specific, a name account, POC where it's just very high level, they can't figure it out, a support case that's, escalated to like a level 4 level, anything, really just like a jack of all trades, right? Do help with demos, POCs, support cases, and now just recently, our little team of senior product solution architects, myself, Brett, and Mario moved under the Jeanette Lee for the solutions team. So now we're getting a start under that and really putting some time into creating not just more content, but quality content for Cloudpath, for the product. And it's really, easy to do. There's always going to be topics to cover, integrations to work out. And this is a perfect time for you to bring me on. We just released 5.8 last week, so we're all very excited. A bunch of new features, but that is essentially my little history, what we do, and where I started, and now kind of being a senior product solution architect. It's hard to even really define that role because I'm all over the place. So.
I know people ask me all the time, what do you do? And I'm like, I don't really know how to explain that. Let's move on to the next topic.
I just do it all. That's what I tell. I just do it all.
Exactly. Depends. What day is it? I'll tell you. When Kevin hired you, what version was Cloudpath in?
Ooh. So when he hired me, Cloudpath, we had Classic Wizard, right? And so that was really the majority of our customers. Enrollment system wasn't even really a thing, or it was just starting to kind of get going. And I believe that was like 4.0. I don't remember ever having a 3. I don't know. It's been so long, right? It's been 7 years, but I believe like 4.0 enrollment system. I don't even know if we ever had like a 3.0 enrollment system, but the very kind of bare bones of enrollment system. So for me, just as a personal experience, I have a lot vested in this product. I have a lot vested in this company. Essentially changed my life, right? And to see how it's grown, right? And when I came in and what we were doing to now, it's really amazing. It's really amazing to see kind of how far we've gone, and I think definitely with Kevin moved on, we're still making him proud, seeing all the different new features and really being able to kind of start to compete with some of the big boys, right? Who have all this money and resources behind it that we might not have, but we're able to really kind of start to compete with them on like a feature level, functionality level. And I think we've always competed with them on like functionality, deployment, ease of use, simplicity. But there's always like, well, there's this one feature, right? And Christopher Mohammed, he's been doing a great job as the Cloudpath PLM and his background as a sales engineer, I think is really perfect, because then he can come in and not just adding features to add features, but adding features to generate revenue, adding features on how we can actually sell the product better. So
yeah, it's always a hard balance for whether you're in SE, whether you're in product management, whatever it is that you're doing. Being in that role can be difficult because you have to balance. Customers are going to ask you for the solar system, and a lot of times you can give them a planet at a time, right? And so when you go through that, you have to balance it out pretty well and really understand not only the team that's behind it, but the business behind it, the business needs behind it, what really comes from it. So it's really cool to see. And I think one of the cool things, like you talked about, was when you look at resources, there's companies out there that can just throw resources at things and crank stuff out. But I think the one thing that has always driven people towards Cloudpath and made kind of a sense of pride, anybody that's even been around it, is how much care and pride has gone into that product to really make it what it is. And it's very well regarded, and people speak very, very highly of it. So I think that, being a part of that is something that is quite special, not only to CommScope as a whole, but to all the customers that are involved with it as well. So that's always good to see. And so it sounds like 5.8 is kind of a big release. Is there some pretty big stuff coming with that?
Yeah. So 5.8 is a huge one. I think last time you had Christopher on your podcast, we were about to start pushing 5.7, and 5.7 was a huge release as well. But 5.8, we kind of were able to build upon some of those big features that were included in 5.7 and then add some new ones. So, the one that I really wanted to get on here to talk about is the tenant portal. Tenant portal is just gaining so much traction right now. Everyone is excited, able to really put it into some different use cases and then be the solution for that. And kind of, going back to what we were talking about with our competitors, is like trying to understand what they need from Cloudpath, because we're so well versed and we can do all these different things. Instead of selling them the product, selling them the solution, right? And so the tenant portal is really helpful on that. And so just a little background on the tenant portal and how it came to be. So I think a couple of years ago, Matt Bianco's PSE team put out a document on how to use Cloudpath in an MDU environment. And that gained a lot of traction. It was a really good document, idea, solution for some of these specific use cases. But the big caveat was that we weren't able, the end user or the tenant wasn't able to manage their own Wi-Fi, right? And so essentially what the tenant portal does is we use Ruckus DPSK, eDPSK, so that means instead of storing it on the controller like we used to do in the past, it's all uses Cloudpath Radius. So DPSK makes it a really nice feature because everyone knows how to use a pre-shared key, right? Knows how to put that in, but it's going to be dynamic to that specific user. And I think you guys have covered that a little bit on the podcast before, but what makes it unique with the tenant portal is we can assign these so we can build a use case, for a building, and it really will apply to anything. Building, any type of MDU. Buildings, extended care facilities, RV parks, marinas, even like a K-12 teacher, right? And it's all about how you define that, right? So we can build out these buildings, and then within that, define units, right? So like if you were in an apartment complex, student living is a big one, because if you get a student apartment, you're not going to be, getting your own Comcast come in. They provide that for you, right? But it makes it very easy to manage your wireless access. So they'll have their own tenant portal. We'll send them, hey, this is your DPSK for your unit, and they'll have a little URL where they can go and then have access to what we call the tenant portal. And now they'll have their own DPSK and now a guest DPSK. right? And they can provide that out. We can limit the amount of devices tied to that DPSK. With the Internet of Things, right? Everyone has 12, 13, 14 devices maybe that need to connect to the Internet now. So it makes it a lot easier in the IoT aspect as well. Just give them a DPSK they can use multiple times, and then also have the guest DPSK. So essentially 2 DPSKs, one for their tenant, their unit, and then a guest DPSK. You can have people come in. Once they're done, you can reset that, kick all your guests off the Wi-Fi, and kind of manage that at the end user level, opposed to before where it was just kind of, here's your DPSK, go get connected. And then the administrator had to more manage that. So less IT interaction is always a huge positive when trying to sell Cloudpath, making it simple, making it, easy for the end user, and most of all, easy for the IT admin who's purchasing it, right? So
yeah. So it's funny because sitting around yourself and Mario and Wes, there's always, I guess, and I've talked about this before, when you look at what happens in networks, right, they're built and architected to kind of provide a solution. But then you put human brains in the middle of it, and we try to do so many other different things with it, right, to where it can become problematic for people like yourself, where you're having to solve a problem that you didn't know was going to exist. So you look at these features that come out, now all of a sudden you're trying to solve for something that somebody looked at and said, well, why couldn't we do this? Well, I guess I don't know why we can't. Let's figure it out. And one of the interesting things I always look at too, when we look at software-based packages where you have features that come out, where do those features get driven from? So a lot of times they're either driven internally, or a lot of times they're driven externally by customers or partners. Was this something that was just kind of slated as being, this is a package we need to include, or did it come up and say, hey, we keep running into these problems, we need to start to solve for them with something?
Yeah, it's Christopher Mohammed. It's his baby, right? So it's definitely like you're saying, these different problems, right, in MDU space where, yes, the solution is great and we can apply that, but there are these few different caveats that are lacking, that it really doesn't, it works, but it could work better, right? And so I think, and this is Chris, the tenant portal is definitely all thanks to Christopher. That's his baby. And obviously the engineering team who works tirelessly to get these features out in a timely manner. But yeah, it's like I was saying, he essentially wrote this document on how to use Cloudpath and eDBSKs in an MDU space that did gain a lot of traction and was able to, help sell the product. But when we tried to sell it, those were the different caveats of, well, if we had end user being able to manage this kind of stuff, that would make it even better. And so again, just, him having the knowledge and the experience on what actually will work, right? Because that's a hard job to be in. I don't know if I'd ever want to be a PLM, because you have so many different requests, right? Every sales guy's like, well, I need this for me to sell my deal, right? And so really to try to distinguish, well, what feature is going to help us really, gain some traction and build some revenue in terms of the product. So,
well, it's tough too, because one of the big conversations that I keep having with people, and this is self-serving, and I know that, so I probably need to shut up about it and just get it over with. But we keep talking about best practices, right? Your team, Solutions, has put together best practice documents that are phenomenal and they're great. But a lot of times when you see, and I've had conversations with Wes before, where he's looking at a environment that he's trying to solve for, and he really can't meet the customer's needs because there's underlying issues with it. And a lot of that comes down to how it's deployed or how it's designed. Mm-hmm. So that's why, when you look at how this stuff is and it's out there, you build a network, it's going to organically grow. I don't care how big or small it is, it's going to. Sure. But as it does, you're also going to have to keep your finger on the pulse of what those best practices look like and apply those going forward. Well, I think as a department within education, we need to kind of circle back on that and focus on some of that best practice stuff going out there, because that's, I think, what you guys run into a lot. And I know in any support role, you're going to run into that, where customers are trying to provide a solution with their products that they can't because there's underlying best practice or design issues with. And, you know, I mean, Cloudpath can solve for a lot of things, but it's kind of like when you're trying to lose weight, right? You can't out cardio a crappy diet.
I know. That's funny you mentioned that, because me coming from a tech support engineer role to now more of a senior product solution architect, where I get involved on like sales, product, proof of concept. So it's me almost stepping into a different role, where in the past it was like, well, this is how it works, right? You can do it this way, you can do it this way, you can do it this way. I'm going to lay out, you know, all your different options for you. But at the end of the day, it's up to the end user, or I'm sorry, like the IT admin, the customer, to make those decisions, right? But a lot of times they don't want to make those decisions, right? They want you to make that decision for us. Like, what would you recommend? So I've been trying to improve on that, on how I can go into it, you know, already knowing, well, this is the way you should do it. Yes, we could do it these other different ways, but this is the way you should do it. And I think one of the big things that I've noticed on how to do that better is, you know, prepping, knowing those information before you go into the call, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how they should do it, and then recommend that. And as you know, in the past, you know, that's what makes Cloudpath so much fun, is because, you know, there's so many different ways to do stuff. There's so many different integrations, so many different ways to use the product, right? Which is pretty crazy. Yeah, a lot of people, you know, you buy a Ruckus AP, you know, most of the time you're using Ruckus AP to broadcast wireless networks, right? That's the main function. Where Cloudpath, they might just buy it, use it as a CA, a certificate authority. Maybe they're just using it for the tenant portal now, or maybe they're just using it for Radius. Maybe they're using it for the web server, or maybe they're using all of those aspects, right? But you won't really know until you get into the actual environment and get down to some of the nitty-gritty details. So.
Yeah, so I want to touch on this because it's one of those things, people think I'm probably crazy and this isn't a big deal. But I talked to Jim Palmer a couple of weeks ago he wrote some blog posts about Mac randomization. Yep. And for people like ourselves, to me at least, I'm like, this is a huge deal. I mean, this is going to flip a lot of things on its head. And because everything out in the world, when you look at enterprise or corporate environments, everything is so Radius or LDAP heavy, and you know, you have all these different pieces. Well, Mac randomization can cause a lot of headaches for administrators, regardless of what role they're in, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I think the thing is, you can't sit here and jump up and down and scream bloody murder that this is a problem and not also be able to talk about what some of the either workarounds or solutions are for it. And from what I understand, Cloudpath is a very well-rounded, not just a workaround, it's a solution for it. Like, it has all the guts and everything to take care of and make this problem basically non-existent. So, I mean, have you guys been looking at this, seeing this?
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is definitely a huge concern among, you know, our customer base, potential customers. And you look at usually surrounding guests, right? How do we get, if you're just coming in someplace for, I don't know, hour, a day, a week, right? Usually we do like the Mac Reg click to join. You think about the Starbucks environment. You come into Starbucks, get your little captive portal, click I accept, and then you're off and running, right? And that has always been that Mac off authentication, Mac off bypass, really a click to join scenario. But with Cloudpath, right, we have unbound DPSKs. So unbound DPSKs solve that issue, where we don't care if your MAC address is changing, randomizing every hour, every minute, whatever. You can still use that DPSK because it's not bound to a MAC address. Where before, right, you could actually you would bind that to a specific MAC, and then if you didn't have that MAC, then maybe you couldn't use that DPSK, depending on how it's configured. But the idea of unbound DPSKs is really our solution on how to combat that, right? And it makes it more secure too, right? You look at, I was listening to your other podcast, you were talking with Chris about how you're in a hotel space and you connected and then they stole all your points, right? So using the WPA2 Enterprise and using that DPSK, that we're not worried about MAC randomization. We're not worried about, an open network. You still have that WPA2 enterprise encryption, but also the simplicity of using a PSK without the idea of a PSK of, oh, here's one password for everyone, right? So it's that dynamic pre-shared key specific to you, unbound to your MAC address, and that's really the solution that is best to overcome the MAC randomization issue, that especially in like the guest space and where a lot of people would always use the kind of click to join scenario that you would see instead of us.
I'm still stumped how that dude got a hold of all my Hilton points, because I was overseas and I either do, if I need to log into anything, I do one of two things. I'm either attached to a VPN at my house or I just use a cell network. So I don't know how they got anyways. Thanks for the reminder of that.
Well, hey, man, if Hilton would have used unbound DPSKs, right, you'd still have all those points, right?
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't even have to go through the headache of calling and trying to get them back. So
yeah, at least they made that process easy. They were like, oh, yeah, this is a problem. Hold on, let me put them all back in there. So
I was like, well, what do you steal the points? And the guy who stole them, what was he going to do with them, right? Like, you just, I don't know, that was always a little weird to me.
That's
like,
what I've always wondered too. I mean, you rip something off, and then how far do you think you're really? I don't know. I guess my whole thing is if we had smart criminals, we wouldn't have prisons. So
no, you probably just did it just to make your day worse, right? You probably didn't get to use your points at all. So
I guess
that's the funnest part.
I can't fault the guy. I mean, I've done stuff before just to see if I could. I mean, I don't think I've done it to somebody else's detriment, but I've done things before just to see if I could. So you never know.
Yeah. No, well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. There's much worse things that could happen. So it's just one of those things. You deal with it and move on, and whatever. Have a nice day, dude. I hope you feel better about yourself.
Yeah. No, and definitely, like, just kind of go back, like, the tenant portal, the DPSKs, that can solve a lot of these issues, right? And to get it into even like a hospitality space, which can be a little more difficult, but we could still use those concepts to make their internet more secure, make managing that a lot easier. I thought the K-12 teacher use case was pretty interesting as well, right? So it's like, the teacher has a specific DPSK, and then the kids come in. She gives them their student DPSK or guest DPSK. They all leave the class, reset. Okay, they're off. So
yeah.
And you can give specific VLAN. That's another part I forgot to touch on. You can do specific VLAN, so you can have each unit in an MDU be tied off to their own VLAN, right? So you don't have kind of. When I was back in college, it was just it's one big open network, right? And you just click and everyone's on there, right? So, kind of showing my age there. I guess it was 12, 13 years ago, but hopefully not a lot of higher ed does that anymore.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, we had in my previous life, they wanted network access control. So we put a NAC solution in, and it was literally a hardware appliance that we had to put in line and configure through it. And it was an absolute nightmare. And they brought it in and asked me to take a look at it. And I said, sure, go for it, but I'm never touching this thing ever again. I don't want the headache, man. I'm out. No way. No way. One of the other things too, there's new managed Chromebook processes with this thing. So I know that anybody that's heard the word, hold on, let me back up. Anybody who's ever had to deal with Chromebooks attaching to a network is probably more interested in this than somebody that uses one.
Yes. No, this is a huge one. I'm like so excited because I don't know how many times, right, where we get into, even me as a tech support engineer, 3-4 years ago, where you get into these situations with a customer and they're like, well, it's a managed Chromebook. Why do I have to still go through a process of touching each one or having someone touch each device, right? And in the past, that was kind of just a limitation of the G Suite console, the Google console, where we could push down, network information, certificates, all that stuff. But to get your unique kind of credentials, unique certificate, that we base on your identity, you would have to go through and kind of go through the workflow, hit our web server through a captive portal. And so there was always a kind of misconception that if it was managed, you just set it up on the admin console and they're off and running. There's no user interaction, right? That wasn't the case before 5.8. And, you get into these situations where it's like, well, that doesn't really seem very managed. But once you actually try an unmanaged process where you got to download an ONC file, go to some Chrome URL, import it, it was a big headache. So the managed process compared to the unmanaged process was really a walk in the park. But at the end of the day, you still had to have either the user, IT admin, whoever, log in and go to the captive portal and go through to get that unique cert. Now in 5.8, this has all changed. So now we have a non-interactive process where we can just set everything up on the admin console. And as long as that Chromebook is joined to, it's essentially like a Google domain, right? As long as it's joined to that admin console, it's a managed Chromebook or equivalent to a domain joined Windows machine, then everything comes down. That unique certificate based on, I believe their computer name, Wi-Fi profile, everything that's needed for them to securely authenticate against a wireless network using ETLS, which is, unique certificates for that identity or that credential. So now it's just set it up as long as, the Chromebooks are joined, and then that's it, right? And they should be able to just open up, log in, and be connected to that network. So, and not have to go through at least that initial process of going through the workflow. So this is like super exciting. I know there's going to be a lot of sales guys that are super excited because I feel like we did kind of sell it that way in the past, but now we can actually do what we're selling. So
I know I told you this does this, but now it really does this.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, I went on my poor buddy of mine, poor guy. He got an earful. I went on a tirade about certificates the other day, and I'm not going to repeat it because it's just a wham thing for me. But you talked about ETLS, so you also have, is it a brand new policy engine or is it just improvements to the policy engine?
So, okay, yeah. So in 5.7, right, when we added PEEP, right, so that was, PEEP, just for people who might not know. So ETLS was what we initially did. When I started all those years ago, that was what Kevin came up as a solution, right? How to get the most secure credentials to authenticate you against wireless in the most simplistic way. So that was always our thing. Secure onboarding using certificates, no passwords. Now, with some of our bigger competitors, PEEP was always a big thing because then for a lot of OSs, you don't have to go through a workflow. You kind of just go click your SSID, put in your username, password, go through some prompts, say you trust the radius you're connecting to, and you're off. So that was an addition in 5.7. Now we can use Cloudpath Cloudpath radius server to bind to your Active Directory and do PEEP if it's with your Active Directory credentials in 5.7. So in 5.7 we added PEEP, and then there was a policy engine that we could use for PEEP in DPSK. Now in 5.8 we can do it for ETLS certs as well. So all our big authentication methods, DPSK, PEEP, ETLS, all can use the policy engine. I believe eventually we might have a Mac registration policy engine on the roadmap, but who knows with Mac randomization? I don't even know if that's going to be worth it now. But yeah, it makes it a lot easier, right? Like there's some of these use cases and stuff with the policy engine that we can use, and now with 5.8 you can use it no matter what type of authentication you're doing, right? So, for instance, one of the big use cases that I always try to teach is, there's two big use cases, but one of them, right, is so you can do it based on location, right? So we can use like a NAS identifier on the actual smart zone based on, APs you tie to that WLAN group, and then on the WLAN group, you can make a specific NAS identifier. So if all these APs are in, say, building A, then we can tie that and make a NOS ID of building A. Then in the policy engine on Cloudpath, we could say, if you're coming from, or if you're on an AP that's within building A based on our NOS identifier, then we can give you some radius attributes, meaning different VLAN, right? We can use, if you're in this location, then we can give you a different VLAN. Another big use case I always teach on is like, and I actually stole this from Chris, but with like a student, in a dorm, right? So they want to watch 4K TV or whatever, but we can't have every student in every dorm watching 4K TV. So we can limit based on, if they're a student, by maybe finding something within their identifier that shows that they're a student. We can do time of day, right? So if it's 8 to 5, and then you're in the dorms, maybe we open that up because no one's in the dorms through 8 to 5. And you can watch 4K during the day because everyone's at class. But then at night from 5 p.m. to 6 a.m., if you're in the dorm and a student, then we rate limit you to, so you can only do 720p or something like that. So it allows a lot of customization and really also taking advantage of some of the VSZ capabilities. User roles is a huge one within VSZ. So we can map based on these like if and then conditions, then we can map that to a user role on the VSZ. And then within a user role on a VSZ, you can do VLAN pooling. You can just assign a static VLAN. Obviously, if you want to, you can do rate limiting, like, user traffic profile. So it really allows for a much better integration with the Ruckus product suite, I think.
When's the last time you sat down and watched something on your iPad, your phone, a laptop, and said, man, this 720p really sucks. I really wish it was in 4K.
Yeah. No, I guess I'm dating myself there, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, 4K it's great. I think that and now they're talking 8K, you get to a certain point where I think your eyeballs run out of pixels.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
really.
They can only get so clear, and there's so many of them. Anyways.
Well, no, it's crazy too. And then you look at like how they got that aspect of now they're charging you for data, like it's your phone, right? Your internet, they're charging for data because of these high streaming, that causes all this data for you to be used, and they want to charge you for it. The ISPs want to charge you for it, right? So, but at least with us, we can limit that. Makes it a little easier on the IT admin, so they're not getting charged these crazy overages, or even if in your house, right? Like I might need to do some rate limiting of the girlfriend here. I don't know.
Well, trust me, I've looked at it for the kids, and there's times where I'm like, nope, I pay for it. You don't get all the bandwidth. I haven't done it yet, just because whatever.
Yeah. I don't have any kids, but I could maybe rate limit the dog. I don't know.
You could try. Depending on what's on the dog's collar, you never know.
That's true. Internet of Things.
Yep.
It's crazy.
I know. Hey, I was going to ask you, 5.8 is out already, right? Or is it slated for release? Okay.
No, it's out. 5.8 is out. If you have an on-premise, you can update it today. Our hosteds were updated. Most of our hosteds were updated today. I think there are still a few hosted, run by the Ruckus NOC team that are slated to update this next week, early next week, I'm pretty sure. So it should be available for everyone except maybe that little bit of customers that might be on those NOC servers. But even like if Ruckus employee, if you're doing training, demo, all those hosted servers, those are all upgraded, ready to go. Yeah, it's exciting stuff. I'm really excited about the new release and all these new features. Now it's I got to kind of dig my heels in and make sure I understand all this stuff. So that's the fun part.
Baptism by fire.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to ask you one more thing because, having an operations background helps me kind of understand some of this stuff. But when you look at how IT infrastructures are ran overall, right? Let's take, for example, you take a corporate environment, you have Windows Server in there, you have an AD domain, you're running NPS on top of it. So realistically, you have most of the functionality that a company's going to need within that NPS server itself, right? But you can take that, and here's where it becomes a challenge is I don't want to go to an IT admin and say, hey, guess what? We're going to give you another tool to manage if it doesn't make their life easier, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I'm asking this for very, very, very selfish reasons because I've been working in NPS server for the past month, way more than I care to admit.
Yeah,
and so fun. when you look at these environments, if you had to go out and sell this solution to somebody, knowing all of these different things, how do you really put this in front of them and say, look, I get it. I understand you have your hands full. You've got plenty to manage, but this is what this tool is going to do to really simplify your life.
Yep. And I think that, really, that's kind of the pitch there, right? Is that instead of you having these different avenues, and I don't know, like you said, you were just kind of mulling through an NPS server. It's not easy. It's not easy to be a Microsoft server admin. I can attest to that. I actually just got my 98 365, which is just fundamentals, and even that was like, oh my gosh, this is so much information. So, but NPS, yeah, it's not easy, right? You're trying to sift through all those policies and stuff like that. So really just the end pitch, I guess, is how Cloudpath can make their life a lot more simple by having, all the features of NPS, being able to integrate with your AD server, and then being able to do all that stuff all under our Cloudpath umbrella, all within this one package that I can set up for you in 30 minutes or less, right? So you have all this, and really the simplistic approach to that, right? Showing them maybe even side by side, hey, this is how I create a policy for you using, you see what they're doing specifically in NPS, and then showing them how much more easy it is to do within Cloudpath, right? And be able to have that all under one roof. It's actually, I was just on a POC yesterday where they were trying to integrate with another, just external radius, right? As you know, there's so many different flavors of radius, but they were trying to integrate with that. And I was explaining, well, we can do this, with Cloudpath, using Cloudpath web server. And then we were just running issues. He didn't have his radius server cert on his external radius. And at that point, it was on me to suggest, okay, well, let's just put it all within Cloudpath, right? And it's all going to be there right within your nice, easy, simplistic UI. You can see what's going on, the policies you apply, the radius server cert is all, and I'm a big, I know you're like the networking guy, so you like the CLI, but for me, where I, from being built on Windows computers, right, 9th to 8th grade, building my own Windows computer so I could play Counter-Strike and have LAN parties with my friends, right, that's what I'm used to. That's what comes easy to me, right? So just having that simplistic UI where they can easily configure it and I can get them up and running, like I said, 30 minutes or less, I can do it, right? Where a lot of our competitors, you're going to spend months, tens, maybe $100,000 in professional services to get those things spun up and stood up and configured correctly, right? So I think really just the ease of use and having all those features within one package, right? And then the price too, the pricing too, right? I'm sure having all those things within one umbrella, everything you can do for one low price, compared to, let me pay for my NPS, let me pay for my, all the different aspects, on all the different paywalls into those different components.
Yeah, let AD be AD and offload radius. I agree. So absolutely.
Exactly.
Pierce, I got to run, but this has been a ton of fun and a ton of information. I really appreciate it. And you have a standing invite. Come back, whether it's 5.9 or 5.8 with an update, whatever you want to do. You're always welcome back. Thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Matt. I really appreciate you having me on. It's something I definitely wanted to do for a while and help interact with you, get some content out. And definitely, I'd love to come back, whether it's another podcast or a live stream or whatever you want to do. Yeah, this is my new mode for 2021 to see how much quality Cloudpath content I can get out to the masses. So anytime I can help and you help get that content out makes me a happy man. Because like I said, I'm invested. I'm all in on Ruckus, on Cloudpath, on CommScope. So it's exciting stuff. Definitely. Yeah, and I'm glad to be here. And And let me know what else you need from me. I'm here to help.
Yeah, we'll get some best practice stuff going. I think maybe we'll do hey, I'm customer. Actually, I don't even have, I'm just going to call myself dummy number 1, and then we'll go through and do a full on best practice deployment and get it rolling. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd love that. But all right, Matt, I'll let you go. Thank you again.
Hey,
Appreciate
thank you. Good chatting with you.
All
right. Thanks. See everybody.
Thank you for listening to Ruckcast. If you just found us for the first time, be sure to follow or subscribe on your platform of choice so you can be notified of future episodes. If you have ideas for future episodes or can't find Ruckcast on your favorite platform, contact us at ruckcast@comscope.com. And as always, thanks for listening.